All right, so here we are, Masters of the Musiverse, and I'm with composer Haley Woodrow and Dr. Charles Weise from Southview Middle School in Edina. Haley is a composer with, and your composition have received awards from National Band Association, the Women's Band Composition Contest, Texas Music Education Association, and the International VLAMO. And Dr. Charles Weise here from Southview in Edina. Chuck is really passionate about bringing new music to the band world. So he's been involved in numerous projects with composers such as Kimberly Archer, Kate Nishimura, Jay Coles, Erica Savano, Jack Stapp, Brian Balmages, John Mackey, Aaron Paridi, Shelley Hansen, and many, many more. Thank you both for being here today.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. So Haley, you would like to give us a rundown on what the Adaptable Band Consortium is. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, yes. Well, adaptable band works are works that can be played in a couple of different formats. You can have full flex pieces where all the parts can be played by all the instruments. But then you can also do what's called, like, for instance, a bow cook model, where you have 4 or 5 lines and certain instruments can play those lines, and you just have to have one instrument for each line to be able to perform the work. But the other thing that's really helpful, I think, with the adaptable band works is you can also scale it up. So, and that was one of the things when Charles contacted me, he said what was really huge is being able to be very versatile. And if you're in a homogeneous setting, like a master class with just French horns, you can play the whole work. If you're in a mixed chamber, you can. But he was saying, though, when you go back into the concert band setting, it's really helpful then to be able to put the whole piece together again. So as far as the adaptable, that word is concerned, that's what that is. And the Creative Repertoire Initiative has a couple of great definitions on their homepage that defines these. And that's what I use because it just seemed appropriate for the time. They really have been a forerunner, I think, in dealing with COVID. So, and then as far as consortium, this is actually, now I have an FAQ on my website page to make very clear what a consortium is it funds the creation of new music. So Charles, he had called me just for a couple pieces, and I said, you know what, let's just do 10. And he was like, okay. But I've done 17 now, and that's because people keep on coming in, and I don't want to call it a consortium and not stay in the spirit of a consortium. And there's just a need to, is the other thing. Lastly, that, you know, what I would say about that as well, like writing over the course of the year, Charles had asked me to write a 0.5 at the beginning of the year, and I just had never done it before. And so I just kept on writing things that were too hard, which added more music to the consortium, which is great, you know, at the grade 1 and grade 1.5. But I feel like I've got a handle on writing a 0.5, so I just released that to the consortium this last week. So that's what the Adaptable Band Consortium has been this year.
So Charles, I'm guessing that this came from you, like you had the idea to do an Adaptable Band Consortium. I mean, did you come to it with like a fully formed idea, or was it something that you guys worked on together?
Yeah, I would say that I maybe brought the idea to Haley, and Haley has run with it. It came out of, you know, when we all had to go home last spring, spring of 2020, and I had a lot of colleagues that were still trying to play full concert band arrangement pieces, but it was over Zoom and Google Meets, and you know, a student is at home playing with the recording. It wasn't obviously the same thing. And my colleague and I, Megan Palmer, is my colleague at Southview Middle School, we just kind of thought, I think that we just need to kind of focus on the individual musician and give them music that they personally could do on their own, or if, you know, with minimal recording, or with a small group, you know, theoretically distance. You know, remember, this was all before they even had the split masks and the bell covers. The aerosol study hadn't even come out yet, so we just didn't know what things were going to be like. And so we were looking at stuff like duets and trios, and we wanted to have some sort of a small group thing that would work if we were only able to have a couple of students together versus if we were able to have a full group of kids together. So the idea was, let's get some sort of adaptable music, and let's figure out how we can get some new music into the genre and into the field as well. And I always keep like a list of some composers I'd like to work with and composers I'd like to commission at some point in the future. And Haley was on that list. We had recently been in a consortium. Our school had been in a consortium that Matthew Hiller from Texas had been running, where Haley and Danielle Fisher and Carol Britton Chambers each wrote grade 1 marches. And actually, the week we all got shut down, we were supposed to go play March of the Shadows that Haley had written. It's a really wonderful piece. And we had actually, I think that was one of our pieces from the Young Band Literature session back in February. So I just thought, well, are there some composers I could call that would help create some music and create some new music? And I also didn't want to get in the way of projects that they might have had going on at the time. Wanted to be just as, very, very Minnesotan in that I don't want to bother you, but I have this idea. I'm hoping I can ask you to help take part in it. So I reached out to Haley, and we had a couple of phone calls, and I said, if you just could use some of your existing pieces, that would be great. And you could create, 3-part, 2-part. And from there, it just became a conversation between Haley and I. And I really credit her with where it's come and where it's gone, because I think she's taken some of these great ideas that she's had and some of the input too. My goodness, I mean, composers sometimes don't ask for a lot of input, but Haley every step of the way has been asking, does this work? Does that work? Can we do that? And folks that have been part of the consortium, I think, have been great in providing that feedback too. So the way it looks now, I hadn't dreamed that it was going to be this. And again, the credit goes to Haley.
I didn't dream it was going to be this either. But one thing I would say, if you don't mind, Scott, back to Charles, is I don't want him to downplay his role, because first of all, he called me at the beginning of May, and I had not even heard of the word adaptable band. After I think I put something on Facebook, my friend Pat Dunnigan from FSU called me and told me, they do this in Asia all the time with this Bo Cook model. It's really, really big over there, but I hadn't heard of it. So Charles had told me at a time when I was licking my wounds. I think a lot of people were, because everything got canceled in April. April's like, that's like the culmination of everything you worked through really for the whole year or more. So he called me, and it was wonderful. It just lifted my spirits, because it gave me the opportunity to contribute to the solutions, which I just feel like the composer body as a whole, it's almost like we've been training for this our whole lives, coming up with creative solutions. That was just in our wheelhouse. And then one of the key things that Charles said is keep them short. Because of being virtual, that it's tough to give them long assignments. And whenever I went and presented to Creative Repertoire Initiative in tandem with the Band Directors Lounge over the summer, they actually had us do our pitches with just the composers beforehand, with Frank Tigelli and a few people. And Dr. Tigelli, he was like, that is exactly what is needed. So I was like, oh, it wasn't my idea. It was actually this band director. So Charles gave me a running start, and again, just lifted my spirits with giving me a way to have solutions rather than just dwell on the problem. So
how many pieces are in the consortium right now? Like, how many total do you have?
Yeah, so I have 14, and then I'm writing one more that I promised. And then I did have 3 that I did for Christmas. So 18, once I get this grade 1 done, it'll be 18.
And I want to deal with this now too, to encourage people, because you can still get in the consortium and take advantage of this music. So how do people do that?
Best way to do that really is just to go onto my website, HaleyWoodrow.com. And I spell my first name Haley. Last name is like Woodrow Wilson, like that. And then on the homepage, there's just a big, box that says Adaptable Works, more info. And goodness, that website page for the Adaptable, it's almost like a website in and of itself now. We have all the content on there. You can see the whole list. You can listen to it. We have page turning scores, FAQs, all the consortium members that are in. So that's the easiest, probably, and best way to do it. And there's a contact me, just everywhere. So it'll go straight, to my email.
I got to tell you, I was this week I was doing my homework, and listening to stuff and going through scores. And I think that your adaptable piece for Tapestries is stunning. And the recording that you put together is really quite amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. That's been a big process, learning how to record things well.
Yeah. I bet.
Has been a process. So thank you for saying that.
So, taking on writing that many pieces for adaptable band seems like an enormous project. Uh, what what's the secret to taking that on and writing an adaptive work? Like, how did you start?
Well, because we were under a crunch and I wanted to do 10, I don't know why, but I just wanted to do 10, like whenever Charles called me. Most of those works, the initial 10 are either adaptations or they're from sketches of other pieces. So whenever I do my creative process, a lot of time I'll sketch several ideas. Sometimes if I'm working with a consortium, and they seem like they want to interact, I'll even send them the different sketches and see, which one are you feeling. So like Mixolydian, for instance, that one was a sketch that I didn't end up using, and I wrote A New Day instead, that piece, A New Day. So to start with the first 10, they were really just adaptations of sketches or existing pieces. And there was so much good information out, again, thanks to the Creative Repertoire Initiative and just so many composers trying to adapt works. Like, for instance, Brian Balmages, he came on and said, you really could write like basically 3 lines, but then an alternate line for tenor sax and horn. That was really helpful because the octave, especially in younger ranges, being more narrow, was tough to, like, if you write an ABC line, the horns can't really play the B line or the C line. C line's too low, B line. So he was saying, write an A, B, D line and then have an alternate C line for the tenor sax and horn. So it was both. It was having a lot of existing music already that I could adapt. And then it was all the great information from our nation's leading composers saying, do this, do that, or consider this whenever you're writing.
You have to relinquish quite a bit of control when it comes to color. Um,
Yes.
do you just kind of say, well, that's the way it's going to be, or do you have ways to combat that?
No. And that was another thing we talked about in our composer community. You really had to let go of orchestration to a pretty great extent for this. So
Yeah.
that's okay.
Charles, I'd be curious your take on this idea that the writing of adaptable band music was not new to this last year. It's been out there before, mostly for smaller schools that needed some kind of flexibility within their ensemble. Do you think that art form of writing adaptable band music has been lifted because of all this stuff, like the Adaptable Band Consortium?
It's funny you ask that because I was actually just thinking about this morning. I thought, what's one of the side effects or maybe the silver linings of this? And I think that we having been involved in a fair amount of commissioning in the last 7 or 8 years, we heard from time to time when we would ask, what kind of pieces do you want? People would say, oh, it'd be great to have some more flexible pieces. And they were people that had a varied instrumentation at their schools. They couldn't control what they had, and so they would want music that could still work for their kids and be challenging. And I think that coming out of this, there's now a plethora of music written for those ensembles, and at various levels too. It's not just grade 5 pieces that are for various instruments. So you say, oh, there's plenty of flexible music, but none of it is approachable for some groups. So yeah, I think that everyone being focused on this for the last year now has created a new catalog of repertoire that is going to really help a lot of programs across the country.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. I hadn't had to deal too much with flexible ensemble music because we're pretty lucky to have pretty full ensembles. And so I bought a bunch of stuff at the beginning of the year when we were hybrid. And I don't want to disparage any music that we played, but some of the stuff that had been written before was just kind of mediocre, and that's how my kids felt about it. But then I had also purchased stuff that had been written by, Kelly and Randall Standridge over the course of this last year. And it was definitely heightened. And so, coming back to Haley, I think that, you are definitely adding to that. And I cannot help but thank composers like you for taking this stuff on so that we have tools to use in our classrooms, now and down the road.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
So did you write any of the adaptable band works totally from scratch. I'm not familiar with your entire catalog, so I wasn't sure if there was anything that was totally new in there.
Yes. So after the initial 10, I think the next thing that I did was write the holiday. I wrote Meo Sir, an arrangement of that, an arrangement of Up on the House Up. So those are fresh new ones. And then the point five, I think I finally, Charles, I need you to look at it and tell me if I finally accomplished the point five. But that one's called Blue Mist. And then I'm working on a grade one right now. So yes, so it's been kind of all of the above. Some of them have been adaptations, some of them were kind of just sketches, and then some of them have just been from scratch.
Any difficulty in writing like one from scratch as opposed to writing from something that's already written?
It poses different challenges. So with writing from scratch, for me, the way that I write, I have to get away from my music for a while before I can listen to it with new ears sometimes. And so in that sense, it takes me longer. So they're usually kind of shorter spurts, but they're more frequent, but spread out. Whereas an adaptable work that I truly adapted, not meaning adaptable like for the instruments, but like I took a full band and adapted it. I already feel that the melody is solid, for instance. So I don't have to come. So maybe I can do longer sessions adapting something rather than writing it from scratch.
So this is to Charles here. I know that you've been involved in a lot of commissioning projects, and I plan on having you back on here to be able to talk about some of that stuff more in depth. But I'm curious about what's your process for finding new composers, especially ones that are self-published. Like, how do you find their names? Where's your like treasure chest of stuff? How do we get it?
I wish I had a treasure chest. I wish that that names and composers would just, here they are, use them. No, it just really comes from listening and seeing names you haven't seen before, and then hoping that they have something out there that you can look at, and then just kind of evaluate in your own ear. And I think that whenever I find a new name, I try to look through as much of their work as I can. I try to see, especially, if they have band stuff or not band stuff, and get familiar with it. There was a composer one time who had written a few pieces for band, and I thought, they're good pieces, but boy, the orchestral stuff this composer had written was kind of amazing. And so I wrote to that composer and said, could you write a piece for band? And could you make it sound like one of these orchestral pieces? And I gave some references, and boy, that composer created a nice piece. So I think it's important to do a little bit of work and research, but in terms of finding them, it's looking at programs, sometimes composers are really good about referencing each other and sticking together. And so when you work with a composer that you like, you ask them, hey, who are some people, like, this consortium that I was with Matthew Hiller, not only brought about finding out more about Haley, but Danielle Fisher is a really talented composer and arranger, French horn player from Texas. And she's been writing some music like this too, some adaptable styles of music. And so I found that and got to email with her a little bit, and I haven't commissioned from her yet, but I did purchase some of her music through that. So it's just kind of being open to finding things and then writing it down. I like I said, I keep a list of, ooh, this composer's got something interesting. And then the next step is just to contact them. I sent Haley an email and said, hey, got a project, what do you think? And luckily she was willing to engage in a conversation with me. Sometimes composers are busy and have other things going on, but we started up a conversation and got the project rolling. So it's just kind of, it's doing it's a marathon, I guess. It's a marathon more than just a sprint. You can spend a day looking through stuff and not find any composers that are to your fancy, but then you can the next day find a couple. But it's always just continuing to listen to things and look for more things.
I do feel like this project is emblematic of just the work that's done in education, to deal with the circumstances, but to not just get something that's, to put in front of kids, but to put in something that's excellent in front of kids. So the both of you, I thank you so much for like putting this together, and just having the vision for what, either having the vision or luck, maybe even a little bit for like what's going to work and what we're going to need. I'm curious, Haley, if you have anything else you're working on right now outside of the consortium, or is all your writing pretty much within the consortium right now?
Well, I work in academia. I work at a university and a college, so I do write chamber works and solo works, and for very high level of difficulty. So that's part of my composition career. And actually, I was thinking about this last night. I think it also helps me a lot with not trying to squeeze all my artistry out of a grade one. And let write something that the kids can play and fits their level. But then I have another outlet that the more difficult ideas that I come up with, I have an outlet for that. So I'm not trying to get it from a 12-year-old that's playing a grade 2 or a grade 1. So yes, I do that. But this has been, my main project this last year for sure, and fitting with the times. That we're in too. I just felt like this project is serving the most people in the most impactful way right now. So, and it's been really a pleasure to work with everybody. So,
Charles, what
Can
about
I ask
you?
Haley a question? Can I
Oh
ask
yeah,
Haley a question?
absolutely.
At some point when you're writing the adaptable pieces, especially the original ones that don't have a concert band complement to them, how do you as a composer feel about how it could sound many different ways? I mean, your piece March of the Shadows, if I play it or if a band in California plays it, if we're playing it the way it's written, then it should sound kind of similar. But these, the instrumentation can change with every performance. So how does that feel as a composer, not knowing sonically how your pieces are going to sound?
well, actually, one of my pieces in two places, I do a clinic on where, I come into the band room, and one of the parts of the clinic is I have the melody written out, or like a couple of the lines, and I didn't know it, but in an adaptable format. I didn't know what to call it at the time. And I let the kids choose, like change the orchestration basically. And I even tell the director, hey, if you like the way something sounds, or if you have a strong section, a stronger section than what I orchestrated it for, go for it. Like, sub them out. And it's fun. And sometimes the kids actually will come up with a combination. I'm like, I didn't even think to put euphonium with French horn there. That sounds great. So I don't know. It's kind of fun to hear the different projects when they come back. I've had several people record Tapestry. And it's been fun to see, like the different instrumentations and what they sound like, and even how they set up and all that. So I don't know. I think it's fun. It's educational for me. So.
And I think that's really neat of you to be able to kind of let go of that, because if you think of some composers in our past, they would say, no, this is the piece that I have written, and it must. And I think that's been a neat thing too, is that I think composers have to be doing that right now, is kind of letting go of what their conception of the piece is and allowing for that spark of creativity to kind of happen, or necessity to happen within programs that are performing your works.
Well, and I think too, especially for educational music, the music, its chief priority should be serving the students. Now, I think having integrity with the compositional elements is important, in that serves the students when it's a wholly thought out piece of art. But then again, just from a practical standpoint, some people don't have a bass clarinet at their school, or if they do, it's held together by tape. So it's if the band doesn't sound good in the way that I orchestrated it, I think just in general with young band music, we see a lot of cueing for that reason, so that you can fit it to your band. Now, if something's going to be played at like a state music convention, I would like it to be represented the way that I wrote it. But inside your school and for your concerts, you need to make that fit your band and fit the kids and make sure they have a good experience with it. So
That's a great response. Thank you. So Charles, I'm kind of curious, do you have any commissioning projects you're working on right now? I know the future is still a little bit like uncertain, but is there anything that you've got on the horizon?
Not as much as I think I normally would. Typically in a year, we do a couple of pieces with the Minnesota Band Directors Association Young Band Lit Session. We usually have one or two pieces with that. Last year we had Kim Archer's piece Grind that was premiered. And then we usually have a couple of pieces with the Minnesota Junior Winds that we're working on. And then we're usually doing one piece, maybe one piece with Southview Middle School. Right now, the only piece that I have for sure is a piece from Christopher Lowry. Christopher is I think a violinist is how I should describe him, but I believe he plays fiddle as well. And he's a really wonderful composer. He was, I believe it was the 2019 Ostwald winner for his piece, Cypress Prelude. Really neat piece, really neat composer. And I reached out to him pre-pandemic, and we were supposed to have a piece this year. But he and I have been in conversation to maybe have a piece next year that could have some adaptable components to it. But that's really the only project. I have a couple other composers that we were supposed to be doing works this year, but we've been kind of pushing those off and moving those off for the time being. Jody Blackshaw just put out a piece that Minnesota Junior Winds commissioned with Minnesota Band Directors Association. It was a booklet project in which she was trying to sort of plant the seeds for students to be composers and arrangers, and so it's a booklet, and it's similar to Haley in that it's a booklet, but it's not similar to Haley in that it's she kind of just gives fragments of pieces and then encourages the teacher to help the student facilitate the arrangement of it and such, and so she's almost finished with that one, and that is out now, and I think people are able to purchase it, and she's offering a lot of professional development along with that too. So I think those are available on her website. But yeah, for the future right now, it's working with Christopher Lowry for next year, and then hopefully things will kind of start ramping up again, and we'll be doing more projects in the future.
Is there anything either you'd like to add about the Adaptable Band Consortium before we move on?
No, just that it is, I'm going to keep it open all the way through the end of the year, the school year. And I was looking over the list last night, and I felt like it was a little light on the harder grade level. So I am going to add probably a patriotic arrangement at a grade 3 and grade 4 level to it. And then I think that maybe that'll come out to 20 pieces, which is twice as much as I had originally committed to, which was already a lot. So that'll probably round it out at that point.
So what happens with those works, like say next year in your catalog? Like we just offer them, or do you have a plan yet?
You're bringing up an interesting point that you and I had actually talked about personally a little bit. So I am thinking of having corresponding full band works to probably about 13 of the pieces next year. I had thought over the summer that the way that we teach, or maybe the way that you teach, it might be beneficial to have a flex arrangement where every instrument has all the parts as far as teaching, and then passing out the full concert band work. That way, if you're teaching the melody to the clarinets, whenever that's happening, everyone can be learning the melody with them too, and the accompaniment parts. And then once you pass out the full band, they know most of the music, 80% of the music. Now my full band, they're longer, obviously, than 1 to 2 minutes, most of them. But the thing that Scott and I had been talking about when we talked on the phone was the way that band directors purchase music. Now around here in Texas, there's a lot of different ways that band directors buy music, but a very popular way is to go on to a big retailer's website and look at their picks and order it that way. And that's a valid way to buy music. But one thing that I have a concern about with being an entrepreneurial composer is the money for a piece getting split up so many different ways that sometimes, especially the composer, is not making very much off of it. And that can be okay, if you have a full-time job and you're just wanting like a little side income. I know a arranger for Hal Leonard very well, and he told me, what he makes typically in a year. And it's a nice, just little side income, and then he has a full-time job, at a college. But as far as like trying to make a full-time living off being a composer, and being able to dedicate yourself to being a composer, that it's just tough when the retailer and the publisher are taking up 90%, of of the sale. So we are thinking, and I say we because my husband was a band director for 7 years here in Texas, and he's actually not doing that anymore. And we're very interested in starting a business, a music business. And we're wanting input, about a subscription model, basically. So having somewhere in the realm of like 20 pieces available, grade 0.5 to grade 4, and having access to all those pieces for the school year. And that's what I'm thinking of offering as well. If I have the flex, available that correspond to the full band works, and then I add, probably 5 to 7 new ones for the year, it'll come out to about 20. And if you don't listen to anything else, as far as my music is concerned, I would love for you to look at Tapestry. Tapestry, I think we finally hit the nail on the head with the recording process. So that's something that we're hoping to do this summer, is make that level of recording for the whole catalog, which really is, besides the writing, that really is the the expense and the time and the investment there. But with that process that we did for Tapestry, when you look at the video, we all look like we're together, but that we recorded each of those isolated. One thing that's great about isolated tracks is I can provide them for your kids to play with, kind of like smart music. It's not hard to put a click to it and bounce that out either. Another thing that's really nice about the isolated tracks is you can edit. So, and that's mine. I spend two to three times as much time editing after I play my trumpet, than I did actually playing. So we're hoping to get some input. Don't let me start sprinting, in a direction that's not going to go anywhere. But the bottom line is, I wonder if this would serve students the best, or just having the option, like you can go on a big retailer and buy their pick, for the year, but just having another option too, that's maybe kind of like a mom and pop, like literally a mom and pop. I'm a mom and my husband's a dad, and he's a former educator and I'm a composer. He's great at technology, and I like making content and talking on the screen and things. So we really are like this budding mom and pop music business, and we're wanting to know what would be most helpful. Beyond the music, is the community. And like I send an exclusive newsletter to my consortiums every month. I invite them to give me feedback. I like the Zoom sessions. I like making introduction videos to introduce the piece to the kids. So that kind of stuff, does that serve the kids in a way that maybe there's not a lot of options?
I love the idea of the one pager, or of the everyone play the melody, everyone, because we make a lot of those for some of our pieces. We're playing a sea shanty, believe it or not, this spring, and we made a one pager so everyone can play the melody, and then everyone's going to play some of the scale things, some of the rhythm things, some of the so if you had something like that, boy, that would be super valuable, because then that would be a great way to introduce the music to the students and work on it before we all hand out the piece, and the flutes have to sit there while the trumpets struggle through it, and vice versa. So that sounds really helpful.
I really appreciate that you said that, because I do have one piece that's published, and I made those exercises, at the end. I gave everybody the melody, and I gave, the like a rhythm issue that I knew would be, need to be addressed, or an interval issue I knew would need to be addressed, and they wouldn't include it. And so when I went to, I've clinicked the piece before, and when I go, they were literally having the 3 problems that I made an exercise for at the end. It's just so frustrating, like, to me, like, I wrote all this, they just wouldn't publish it, Yeah. So that's that. And back to, so we're not serving the students as well. Right. We're not serving the director as well, because I can make a melody sheet in like 30 seconds, but you, busy band director, that takes up time. I don't know how often maybe you use a notation program or not. There's varying levels of that. I can make it so fast, and that's where too, having a husband as a business partner and former educator helps a lot too. because he did the top jazz band, but he did the bottom concert band. So he's really, grade 1 through 3, grade 0.5 through 3. He just has had lots of experience with it. So.
All right. Well, that'll close this portion of the conversation. I thank both Charles and Haley for talking about the Adaptable Band Consortium.
It was
Thanks,
fun.
Scott.